I call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, August 8th, 2019. All managers are present except Manager Hejmati and Manager Rognes, who will be with us shortly. There is no member of the public here, so the next item is approval of the agenda. And I would like to make, no, never mind. Is there any change anyone wants in the agenda? Is there a motion to adopt, approve? Manager Miller? And second by Manager Olson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Under information items, we have the pleasure of having introduction of a new staff this evening. So Mr. Heyman and Mr. Sherman.
Good evening, Chair White and managers. I'm pleased to introduce Gabriel Sherman. He's our newest planner project manager with the district. He started with us on Monday, and he's here this evening to say a few words about himself and a little bit of his background and just introduce himself.
President White, managers, pleased to be here tonight on my first board meeting and part of my first week at the district. Thank you for your introduction. So I come here with a background in urban planning. Most recently, I was a transportation planner at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. Prior to that, my education was in environmental planning more generally. So I'm really looking forward to continuing my onboarding, which is a lot of good information coming my way, and starting to dig into whatever projects I'll be assigned to in the next few weeks. So I look forward to working with all of you closely over the next however many years.
You go by Gabriel
Whatever, either Gabe or Gabriel.
or Gabe? Okay.
Well, welcome.
Thank you very
Nice
much.
to have you.
We might get blamed for a lot of stuff, because go by Gabe.
Did you start Monday?
I did start Monday. Yeah.
So,
So are you a Viking Timberwolves and a Twins fan now?
It only took 3 days, but I am a fan.
All right, that's all I need to know.
Welcome.
Thank you very
Oh,
much.
well,
good to
that's
have
true, but I didn't want to
Thank you.
keep carrying on too long.
Press him too hard. Welcome.
next on the agenda is the consent agenda. And the only item is the minutes. I'd like to move them to 11.2, just a couple of quick changes I'd like to make, or small changes rather. Then you'll notice that the board and committee task force meetings are listed, including Manager Loftus attending Citizens Advisory next week, and Manager Maxwell assigned to Citizens Advisory in September, and I'll go along in September also and introduce him. And then jumping back up, President's report, I really have only one item to mention, which is that Manager Maxwell's final onboarding session was last week, and I attended that.
Jessica.
And Manager Loftus, if you would give us an Operations and Programs Committee meeting report.
Yes, I'll keep it very brief because I believe everyone attended. But so that the public knows, we reviewed our 2020 budget and looked at the detailed work plan documents. And those are in pretty good shape, and they'll be coming to a public hearing on August 22nd. And then we spent the majority of the time getting a very thorough update on our IT plan with both Ms. Reynolds and our WSB consultants, and trying to move forward on a multi-year project and budgeting for that. And we used every second.
Thank you. Yes, we did. Ms. Christopher, item 9.1, the annual public hearing on the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan.
Thank you, Chair
Now
White,
open the public
managers.
hearing.
I just have a couple slides just as introduction here before we open the hearing, just for context. So this is an annual requirement. As you all know, the district is regulated as a municipal separate storm sewer system under the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System rules. Because of we are the public drainage authority for 8 ditch systems that are shown in red on the map. There are also 2 of our stormwater ponds that are considered part of our system as well. So pretty limited jurisdiction as far as the actual system that falls under these requirements. But as an MS4, the district is required to have a stormwater pollution prevention plan, which is included in your packet, and generally covers the 6 minimum control measures listed on the screen, which we meet the requirements through our various programming, as well as the district's rules and inspection program. The SWIP is always available on our website. If there are any questions, we've received none to date. We did publish the hearing in the Strib and on our website. And as I said, we're required to have at least one annual opportunity for public input, and we've received no comments to date. I don't believe we have anyone here for it this evening. I'll take any questions that there are.
Questions for Ms. Christopher? There are some things where we need to come up to compliance. Is that because they changed their permitting?
Yeah, Manager White, managers, there was a draft permit that came out that we're reviewing and may need to make some changes. And I think that will be more formally out for comments this fall. So we're awaiting those changes. There are a couple things that have been flagged through some of the reviews that they've done with the cities that rely on us for permitting. Areas that we've kind of viewed as equivalent that aren't specifically to the letter of the permit, and so we've been in coordination with the PCA on how to address those through our upcoming rule revisions.
Thank you. Anything else? Is there a motion to, we don't need a motion, we just had, that was the public hearing. Close the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Item 10.1 is permit 19014, Mr. Roach.
Good evening, President White, Board of Managers. Before you is permit 19-014. This project is brought before you at the request of a member of the public. The applicants are not requesting any variance or exceptions and are meeting all applicable rule criteria. During staff conversations with the member of the public, it was determined that the main concerns were stormwater runoff and compliance oversight during construction. Those will be the focuses of the presentation tonight. So just a brief overview of the presentation, going over project location and background, rule analysis, and then lastly, staff recommendation. So this project is located along the northeastern shore of Betty-McCoska on East Lake Calhoun Parkway. Under aerial imagery here, you can see the current land use is 3 residential lots with single-family home structures. The applicant is proposing a lot combination and then to demolish the existing structures for the construction of a new multi-family residential building. The project triggers both the district's erosion control and stormwater rules. So moving on to the first rule triggered, which is erosion control. The applicant has submitted an erosion control plan that outlines erosion control and sediment control best management practices, including a rock construction entrance here in the upper right-hand corner, as well as silt fence along 2 above-ground basins, which I'll get into under the stormwater management section of the presentation, and then silt fence and biologs around the construction area. The applicants have also have identified an erosion control inspector to make sure that these practices are installed properly and functioning, and have submitted a vegetation stabilization plan that includes both sod and a mix of native species and pollinator-friendly species of flowers, and then deciduous and coniferous trees and shrubs. So it's under the plan submitted, the applicants are meeting their requirements for the erosion control rule. Now we'll move on to stormwater management.
I suppose you want to finish the report, but it seems to me that this is the first of many that you're going to be running into around the lakes, because they're doing away with the zoning of single-family homes in the city. So I think it's really critical that, I know there's a focus on creating more home opportunities in the city, but at the same token, there was a strong feeling against multifamily units around the lakes and stuff, and for the last 100 years. And that's been all abandoned by one amendment to the zoning code a year ago. And it seems to me that we've got to be pretty careful about our approvals in terms of the impact of the multiple teardowns like this, because I think they're going to lose all the lawns and everything's going to be hard surfaces. So I'm sure you've done a good job on examining this one, but we've got to be aware of the fact that there's not going to be a lot of lawns and soft surfaces around lakes in the future.
For the comment, Manager Miller, and I do understand those concerns, and would like to voice that, permitting staff does ensure that all applicable erosion control, stormwater management rules are being reviewed by staff, and that vegetative plans are being reviewed and considered as well.
Thank you. Mr. Whisker?
Aside from tonight's permit, that's something that we can certainly take a look at for the chain of lakes. The tributary areas to the chain of lakes isn't just the properties along the parkway. Obviously, everybody knows that, but we can look at very quickly, I think, potential impact of tear down rebuild and what the magnitude of change might look like for the board.
Good, thank you. Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, it's perfectly fine.
Go ahead, Mr. Roach.
So moving on to stormwater management, under existing conditions, there is approximately 10,680 square feet of existing impervious surface. Due to under proposed conditions, there is a slight increase in the total amount, which would increase it to about 12,290, as this parcel is less than an acre total in size. Under the district's stormwater management rule, the applicant is required to incorporate a BMP on site. In this instance, the applicant is proposing actually 3. They have 2 above-ground infiltration basins here in the northwest corner, and then as well in the southwest corner. And then as well, they will also be proposing a underground infiltration basin just south of the basin in the northwest corner. And under the stormwater rule for a parcel of this size that is less than an acre, generally speaking, applicants the BMPs are not required to provide a specific scope of volume, rate, or water quality improvement. With the BMP plan submitted by the applicant, they are actually providing both rates control and phosphorus treatment for the site. So with this consideration in mind, it's staff's opinion that they are more than satisfying the requirements set forth under that rule. And so staff's recommendation would be approval of the permit under the conditions that the applicant submits both a maintenance declaration for the BMPs and a financial assurance under stormwater rule for the BMPs as well.
Thank you. First, may I get a motion to approve the permit? Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Rognus, and then your question, Manager Olson?
Could you go back one slide? Okay, toward on the right side, as you go down the left side of the right drawing, there is an area, that oval shape, where just on all these drawings it says construction limits, where the patio is. What is that half circle?
Do you want
intended for.
Maybe point to it?
Yeah. Right here.
No, I did not recall off the top of my head.
Cut out for a tree or something?
I do believe it is part of like the overall planting.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions, Mr. Roach? Manager Loftus?
I had a quick question just for my own knowledge. Your maintenance declarations, are those filed on with the county on their property, or how do those work? It might be for legal versus you.
Thank you for the question. So yes, the maintenance declarations are required under district rule to be recorded with Hennepin County. And the applicant, property owner would be responsible for maintenance and upkeep of those BMPs.
So say this resident who was concerned and wanted it heard had an issue, the district can go to the owner and say, have you maintained these BMPs as allowed by this declaration? We're allowed to ask them that and require them to maintain them. Is that the idea of them?
That is correct. And then since this is since the project does trigger the stormwater rule, this would be one that we would add to the permitting staff's list of regular inspections.
Okay.
So staff would be regularly visiting the site, making sure that BMPs are being designed as permitted and that erosion control features are properly installed and are functioning.
Great.
And Manager Loftus, I'll just add too, the declarations are in perpetuity, so they travel with the underlying property owner, and they have specific guidelines on when maintenance is required, and also requires the property owner to submit reports to the district annually to track how well the BMP is functioning.
Well, great.
And they're filed with the recorder or the registrar.
Yes, the declaration is filed with the recorder or the registrar.
Manager Hejmati, you had a question?
Yes. Is this going to be a set of apartments? Or?
Correct, yes.
5 units?
Okay, so the person who's going to be responsible for the maintenance then is the property owner who rents it out?
It'd be the property owner of the building.
Of the building?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
that's correct, Manager Hezmati.
Okay.
And then Manager Olson, another question?
No, I found it's a 34-inch oak.
Okay.
Manager Miller, do you have a question?
Not anymore.
Okay. Anything else for Mr. Roach? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And this was your first presentation?
Correct.
Well
Very
done.
good.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
There's a club meeting.
Madam Chair,
First, Mr. Welch and then Manager Miller.
just to add briefly to the presentation and responding to Manager Loftus' question, the first step is to ask that the maintenance be done, but the volume can be turned up from there, legally enforceable contracts.
Great. Thanks.
Manager Miller.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the zoning issues in Minneapolis.
Oh, you do too.
Yeah, I don't know, we balance out, there are social issues with, on this, trying to make this community more diverse, allegedly. I don't think that there are going to be a lot of assisted units in that building, but with the problems that we're facing on the other end of the city with flooding. So I think somehow or another we've got to figure out an appropriate awareness for everybody that more hard surfaces creates more water, which creates more flooding and makes other portions of the city less inhabitable. I don't know how you crawl into this social economic issue from watershed standpoint, But we've got to make sure people are aware that every time they fill a surface with hard cover, that, you know, the folks in the Hiawatha, Lake Hiawatha area are getting more water, and it isn't coming out of Grays Bay. So, in your discussions with the park board and the city on the improvements on the creek in South Minneapolis, I ask you to include that in the discussion, that, you know, more water can be seen in the future if we don't start reviewing this in a more comprehensive way than just the social economic thing.
That could also be part of climate change discussions, yeah.
Exactly.
Andrew
What did
Loftus.
Minneapolis, excuse me, what did Minneapolis change, or is it all, could that be?
Their comp plan
There's
did
no,
away with.
there's no restrictions on single-family homes anymore. You can build up to three
That's, okay, that was my question. It was-
Three
it was
units on any.
3 units?
Anywhere in the city.
Three
Anywhere in the
units,
city,
okay.
and
I was wondering if they could build a 10, more than that, but it's 3 units?
how many units are there? Yeah,
Looks like 5, but I,
5.
But 3 lots.
3 lots. Yeah,
Three
three
lots,
lots.
yeah.
It ain't be combined.
But this issue is gonna get more complex as we
Oh,
move
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Andrew Loftus.
Just to piggyback on that, when you talk about the analysis that you would bring back at some point, I don't know all of our rules as well as permitting does, and you do, but it seems to me like this most recent example, it did not hit the over 1 acre requirement, which probably wouldn't happen until you combine 4 lots in the city at least, if not more. But I noted that it went from 10,000 square feet of hardcover up to 12,000, so a 20% increase in hardcover. I don't know if that's also a trigger, or if there's multiple triggers or not, but I don't know our rules well
Right.
enough to know what those are. So maybe they just didn't hit any of them, but it seems like there's probably other ways of reviewing it, perhaps.
Right. Can I
Do you have
respond to that?
responses?
Well, as usual, I just sort of drill down right into the nitty-gritty of the issue. I mean, that's right on the money. I think there's a number of other analyses or planning initiatives that Manager Miller introduced into the planning committee agenda at the last meeting, and I talked to him about reporting back at a meeting coming up, just framing what it's going to take to do those, and we'll add this to the docket. Not that we're going to run off and do a full tilt, but we can do a kind of preliminary screening and say, if you want to look at it, here's what it's going to take. But yes, some of the notes I just said is I think we should be looking at the magnitude of change, Parkway, chain of lakes, the area that's impacted by the zoning change. And I think we'd be guided by, where that applies in the city, looking at the drainage areas, the potential risk in change in hardcover. But then the biggest thing is what's the rule threshold? So we need some guidance on how are people going to go about lot combinations. If it were me and I knew I could get under the city's stormwater and district stormwater requirement with a 3-lot combo because it's less than 1 acre and our impervious triggers are different, that's what you're going to see because it saves money. So we should look at that, and what we'll want to do is educate the board on what our triggers are and what's the likelihood of these things falling in or out of regulatory scope, not just for ours, but for the cities, because the city has its own stormwater provisions that in some instances are a little bit more prescriptive. So that's right on the money.
Manager Miller? Thank you.
You know,
Mr. Misra.
I don't want to get us into a situation where we're the evil regulator, but in the same token, I think we got a responsibility to make people aware of the consequence of more hard surfaces, and that is going to be very costly, and the costs are going to be absorbed by the property taxes, which raise the rents and makes housing more expensive. I spent half this week on low-income housing issues with some friends working on some issues, and it's very complex. This is just another issue that comes in. And we don't want to add to the cost, but, there's
Well, I think it's right at the heart of the district's model in a lot of ways, and it's central to how you see business being done a lot. I think there's well-intention behind some of the changes, and you could kind of argue the policy, but to solve the housing gap and address affordability, there's been a policy change. I don't know if the city's looked at the natural resource impact. And so there's the livability, economics, and water. And I think we can look at the policy that the city set and take a look at what does it mean for water, and then start having some intelligent conversations from there.
Not, we're getting way off, or at least I am. We should do some kind of analysis of single-family homes, and if 20% of them were torn down and they accounted for 20% more hard surfaces, how much water is that gonna, I don't know if it's doable. I don't know if that's something you could, we don't have the computer capacity yet.
We'll get it to you in a couple years.
Just add it to our contingency.
But, somebody should do some
The whole budget, won't it?
analysis of this, because this could be real.
We'll look at how to constrain the analysis, because there's some things that we know and are guided, and we could talk to, our folks that we've used for housing analysis before, of like, what's the phasing for implementation of the city's policy over time and space, and then we'll be able to report back to the board on what it's going to take to crunch the numbers, with or without technology.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Mr. Welch.
Very briefly, 2 points of reference that would be cheap to perhaps inform that discussion. As the city of Edina, of course, has been a locus of tear down rebuild with quite a bit of increase in impervious on a lot by lot basis.
1,200 tear downs in the last 10 years.
Just that explosion. And most of where that occurred was in an upper watershed that drains down to 9 Mile Creek in an area that cannot really sustain. It's very similar dynamics to the Hiawatha. And there's other legal recourse available to those parties, but in the circumstance, the legal responsibility would be so hard to trace to any single development that it would be cost prohibitive to pursue it. So you're not, and the watershed districts are not, legally meant to adjudicate those between property owners, but I certainly agree with the sentiment that there's a role there. 9 Mile Creek, in recently redoing its rules, went in and looked at the proportion of residential in its watershed and crafted an interesting single-family and home, which is less applicable here in Minneapolis, but a single-family home weighted stormwater requirement in order to try to capture that, because the percentage of work in that watershed that is residential was going to be very high over the next 10 years. So that work would be relatively easy to look at for compare and contrast purposes.
So you can
I can.
touch base with Mr. Whisker as he prepares the report.
As he wishes.
Please.
If he's still answering the phone when you call, right? Thanks, everyone. We'll move to item 11.1, Resolution 19071. Ms. Reynolds, authorization to release an RFP for banking services.
All right. Thank you, President White, board managers. Don't have a presentation for you this evening on this. We're requesting your authorization to release an RFP for banking services that we've prepared with Baker Tilly, our financial consultants. This is kind of in response to the board's direction to staff in 2017, and then again in 2018, and one more time here in 2019, and we're actually going to try and make it happen. So I request your authorization to release it. Is for our standard banking services, that the bank that we appoint every year to be a depository of the district funds. And if you have any questions in regards to it, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. First, is there a motion to adopt? And a second. Questions for Ms. Reynolds? It was an education to read the the RFP.
It's an education to write it, President White.
I believe that. Anything? All those in favor, please say aye.
Well, working with Baker Tilly, they will send it out to, they have a list of banks that they've kind of worked with and that we've sent out when we did the RFP for the Carver County agreement. So I know they'll distribute it directly to some people that they have contacts with, in addition to posting it on our website and probably in the league's website and a couple other places that will get it posted.
Okay, thank you very much.
Did we vote?
You did.
Yes, we did.
No, you made a motion, but we didn't
All
vote.
those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I did forget to vote, thank you.
There we go.
It's as good as having a conscience. And then I'd asked to have the minutes pulled, so that's the next thing. One change, I think, sort of matters more than the others. At line 71, it says the liaisons are working on planning, but it's actually strategic communication.
71?
Line 78.
78.
Strategic communication.
And then as long as I was looking at it, at line 74, whiskey is W-I-S-K-I. And then at line 120, this is really just, it's a said instead of aid. I wouldn't have brought that up except that I wanted to make that change about strategic communication. So I would move adoption of the minutes with those changes.
So moved.
Second, manager.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. I didn't ask for
Managers,
discussion.
you already voted and approved it. There's a couple other typos that I fixed, and I apologize for those typos. We had a challenging computer week.
All is forgiven.
Yeah.
You need a new server.
Smith Partners.
We have an old one for sale.
It almost works.
Yeah.
Oh, we're all so funny.
It's a long afternoon.
Let's go to the highlight here, the administrator's report.
The highlight, well, that's a new one.
Make it good.
A couple, I'd already mentioned, I just wanted to pass along a kudos for our new GIS technician, that's Alex Steele. He applied and was appointed to be a member of the Minnesota Geospatial Advisory Council. They're a coordinating body for the geospatial community, so it's this cross-section of organizations including counties, cities, universities, business, nonprofits, and they provide guidance, obviously, at that state level on the future of GIS. So it's great to have somebody in that leadership role. There's 23 members. They meet quarterly, and he'll be around on there since 2021, and hopefully bringing back what he learns to our advantage. Brian Beck this week and other research and monitoring staff were out in the field doing tagging for the carp work in Long Lake. And so they coordinated with Long Lake Waters and did a little bit of a demonstration. Long Lake Waters wanted to get their constituents out as part of an engagement effort just to kind of hype the event and learn more. And they're very much interested in building some media and communications around future events, which are going to be scheduled for August 26th and the 30th. So as if that starts to mushroom and get a little bit bigger, we'll make sure the board's kept in the loop. The strategic communications, President White brought that up in the minutes. The consultants John Himley and Tom Horner have been making the rounds and having a series of productive conversations. It sounds like they're getting a lot of what they considered strong and deep insight and feedback. So we'll see what that means when they synthesize that down into the insights. Right. I know, strong and deep. It's written right here in quotes. On Tuesday, August 20th at the Minnetonka Community Center, as part of that effort, Vendi, our website consultant, and Telly Mamayak will be coordinating a series of focus groups involving our CAC, recreationists, property owners as part of that secondary tier 2 audience to get some insights out of that group. That work will inform website and other programming as we move forward. Tom's been hard at work onboarding, training all of his new staff, and we've got a congratulations for Will, Aaron, and Cole, who just recently completed their wetland delineation certification. So we now have 3 certified wetland delineators on staff, which is a new record and I think keeps us functional and responsive. Arden Park, I know Manager Miller has been driving past there and keeping me apprised of the tree plantings. That's really been the focus this last couple weeks in construction, is finishing trails, getting the plants in the ground. And so the stream bank work's finishing now that the water levels are lowering a little bit. The playground's going to be under construction the week of August 19th, so as you keep driving by, let me know how that's going. Shelter building is framed, so you can, if you do take a look at it, you can see sort of the scale and scope of the park building and how everything's coming together. And that's going to be finished early in October, so the park's coming together really well. Water level updates. This is the first time we've said this, so I'll knock on wood, since the spring. Water levels are normalizing. So Lake Nokomis is finally at OHW at 815.4, so is Lake Minnetonka. Grays Bay Dam discharge is around 75 CFS. So some welcome relief here as we enter the fall.
The Arden Park, we got the best publicity you could have had when those kids got that 70-inch sturgeon. There's like 50 kids down there all the time now. And the park has gotten more use in the last couple of weeks than it has in the previous couple of years. It's just loaded with kids are coming from every direction on bikes and coming down on tubing and looking for that 70-inch carpet as well as the DNR.
Right, they're still looking for it.
But it is just spectacular, the plantings that they're doing there, and it's going to be every bit as nice as Cottageville Park. I mean, it's not as many hard surfaces, but it's the quality of the thing is the same. It's really really cool. For the next meeting, could we have some enter into the record about the Lake Minnetonka vegetation and AIS master plan? It's, so that we can make it clear what our position is on it. And
sure. And I'll note that that sturgeon didn't show up until we constructed our pools and riffles in the creek. So.
Wasn't it south of the park, though?
Yeah, right.
Details.
I looked at that.
Well, no, the park actually goes, the kids were in the park.
56th?
It goes on the other side of 56.
Okay.
And that's where the kids were on the new trail there.
Thanks for the geography lesson. I had lost track of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We went to enough meetings on it.
Yeah, we sure did. Anything else? We are adjourned.